Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Warning, no matter how much of a neckbeard you are, never ever take any authentic or historical Japanese weaponry into your house. Let me tell you about the craziest 3 days of my life. Me, 4 years ago. Just got into a rather crappy apartment with my best friend from high school. Call him Chris. Chris likes a clean kitchen. We have 2 toasters. To Chris, that is one too many. Chris gets upset, hands me the toaster and basically says, "Sell this." Sure thing, let me just make a garage sale for our one toaster in the middle of an apartment complex that has no garages. Selling online was just taking off in our community. My mom did it and told me about Swip Swap. It's this online Facebook trade store, like Craigslist except more bartering. I figure, if you're selling your property on Facebook, you're probably an idiot, so all the more reason to upsell it. Post brand new white, 16 inches, 4-slot toaster, $50 plus, will accept trades. Get nothing for an hour. Get nothing for a day. Log into Facebook next morning. I got one comment. Some guy named Joseph Mayer sent a quick comment.
"I will give you an authentic Wakizashi for $200. And your toaster."
Wakizashis typically go anywhere from $450 to $5,000. Used by samurais to slice the heads off of honorable opponents and eventually commit seppuku. Sends a nice pic of the sword in the scabbard. It wasn't described very well at first, but I would be the one paying $200 and a toaster for this sword. It's still a fantastic deal, seeing as I'm only losing a $220 value for this potentially $5,000 product. I'm not even the slightest bit suspicious. He tells me it's Kodo era, time of the samurai. And it looks quite authentic. Make the trade. Don't tell Chris. Plan on upselling the shit out of this sword. Joseph wants to meet at a McDonald's way south of town tomorrow morning. Say okay. Go to bed. Couldn't sleep because of how excited I was about making the major bankage. Next morning at McDonald's. He drove in on a red pickup truck. He opens the door. 3, maybe 4 Red Bull cans spill out. Not the most neckbeardy guy, but still gave off the social outcast vibe. Every time I ask him something, he acts like he didn't hear me and asks that I repeat the question. He maintains full eye contact when he talks and smiles a lot, which would have been pleasant from anyone else, but from him it was just awkward. "Joseph, where do you work?"
"Oh, I'm unemployed as of now, but I've applied to a few places, so that should change soon."
I ask him how he got the sword.
"It was gifted unto me by my
It seriously took him 2 years to finish this thought.
trainer."
Automatic sketch alert activated. Setting, default. I had already given him my toaster when he pulls out the sword wrapped in a red towel.
"Try not to take it out of the towel, or if you want to, you can put it in your own red cloth. It might help the soul in the sword get used to your home."
Literally think about breaking the deal at that very moment. I checked the inside of the towel to make sure it was the actual Wakizashi. I swear to this day I heard him whimper. Smile at Joseph and say will do. Drive home still feeling like a millionaire. Tell Chris I made a trade for the sword. Don't tell him about the $200. He was a manager at the local Chipotle and didn't work as many hours as me. He was also stingy with his money. At first he didn't understand the gold mine that I had just uncovered. I explained to him that the very least I could do with this sword was sell for $450 and I could potentially get around $3,000. He was a lot happier after that. Keep the sword on the top of our entertainment system. I immediately looked to Google for local pawn shops. The closest one is in our downtown vicinity. This is when the shit hits the fan. I get dressed to go to the pawn shop. Get my game face on. Just going in for them to quote me on the price, like an antique roadshow, potentially a sale if the price is right. Walk into the living room to get the sword. The towel is literally unrolled and the sword is on the ground. Remember that Joseph wanted me to keep it in the towel. Quickly wrap it back up and get into the car, trying to make nothing of it. Drive to the pawn shop. Extremely garbage stuff they sell. The AC was broken, or maybe he didn't have any, but the door was open and a lot of fans were on. Place the sword on the glass countertop, feeling badass. Guy comes out from his office. "Hello, sir, I'm trying to sell this authentic Kodo era Wakizashi, and I was just wondering if you could quote me on the price." I take it out of the towel and the look of curiosity on his face is apparent. Just hook the guy sale.gif.
"Let's step into my office."
He examines it for about 10 minutes and then looks at me and says that it's worth $600 without the judgment papers, but he would take it for $800. That is some classic pure grade authentic Kodo era bullshit. I ask him if I can get the real quote.
That's what I'd pay for this.
Hear glass crack right before he finishes the thought, like a really loud snap. We both go to the front of the store and his countertop is broken. One long split.
Oh shit. Now I got to pay for this shit too.
Politely decline his proposal and leave to go to an antique store just north, like 600 feet of the pawn. They give me a better quote but don't have the money for it. Go home. Put it back on the shelf in the towel. Go to bed. This is when the shit hits the boat engine after it already went through the fan. When I was a kid, my mom and I had this thing where we would pray over anything that came into our house that it wasn't of Christian manufacture, B wasn't glorifying God, or C came from a sketchy person. Because otherwise, I would have nightmares. Every single time, without fail. I hadn't gone to church since I got out of high school. I didn't pray over the sword. That night I had a dream that Chris and I were being hunted by animals in an incredibly dark forest. First it was a boar, then it was a polar bear, and finally a tiger. While we were hiding from the boar, the polar bear crashed out of the bushes, charging us. We started running and it chased us to the end of a cliff. When we turned around, it had turned into a tiger. It attacked Chris. I then woke up to the sound of Chris screaming in pain. I got up and tried to run to the neighboring room. He was still writhing. He was awake. He says he woke up because he felt like his hair was being pulled and then he felt a sharp pain slowly move around his neck. He says it felt like he was being beheaded. Turn the light on and sure enough, there is one big raised red mark like a collar around his neck. Start to feel the full weight of the situation I was in. I go to the living room and the sword is on the ground again, out of the towel. Shit, the third brick of the night. Get scared half to death by our ice maker. Turn on every light in the house because why not? Immediately look up some prayers online. Literally prayers.org or something like that. Find a prayer for peaceful sleep for Chris and me. Even though we don't sleep for the rest of the night. Find a prayer for casting out the spirit of fear. Have no sage to burn. Just want to get rid of it at this point. Next day, go to pawn shop. On the way there, I keep feeling dizzy, like I'm going in and out of a head rush. Literally have to pull over because I can't see at one point. The way there is a haze, I feel like just throwing the sword off the side of the road. Like, I don't have full control over my actions, they're just happening. Arrive at the pawn, the guy hasn't opened up. Sit in my car. Feel like I'm in a submarine. Pawn shop guy opens up around 8. I basically chase him into the shop. Tell him I'll take the deal. Okay, I'm sorry but 800 is all I can do without the judgment papers. Yeah, okay, whatever, just take this damn doomstick from me. He hands me the money. He probably thinks I'm a crackhead or something. Transaction is made, I bolt. As I drive away, the nausea alleviates and I gain full control and awareness. Get home, Chris, who was a skeptic before, starts researching remedies for demons and evil spirits. After we take care of everything, life carried on as normal. I still talk about this at special occasions, despite being a garbage storyteller.
This happened to a friend of mine about a year ago. Anna was a close friend. For 3 days I had no contact with her, which made me worried. She was not answering my calls and she was also absent from our classes. I called her mom and I asked her what happened to Anna. She told me that Anna was acting really strange these past few days ever since she came home from school last Tuesday. She would get mad for no reason to the point that she got physical, her mother said. There was one point that she stabbed her brother with a kitchen knife, but good thing it wasn't fatal. She would also mumble something to herself that they can't understand, accompanied with a disturbing blank look on her face. And she would always faint with no recollection of what had happened. That's when they decided to consult a known witch doctor in our area to know what was happening. According to the witch doctor, the reason why Anna was acting strange is because of the necklace she found on her way home. The spirit of the owner was attached to it and was very angry because she died tragically in a road accident. The spirit attached herself to Anna and caused her violent behavior. Anna got mad when the witch doctor tried to take the necklace away. She was very strong and there were like 4 people who had to hold her down. She got considerably better after the necklace was taken from her. The witch doctor buried the necklace after doing some rituals to help its owner cross to the other side. So yeah, that's it. Anna and I are still close friends to this day and she refuses to talk about that incident anymore.
So one day at Sir Speedy I was on my lunch break, just eating my sandwich behind the building. I was sitting on the van's bumper just listening to riff-raff when I saw the owner of the thrift store throw a big box of what he deemed junk. I always took my lunch at this time because I wanted to see what kind of treasures I could find for my house, be it a toaster or rugs. I always found something good. After the owner walked into his shop, I finished my sandwich and walked over to the dumpster to take a look at the daily finds. I found broken plates, Bibles, clothes, the usual junk. While digging around, I found a mold-covered wooden cigar box. Inside this cigar box were these 3 dolls. I thought they looked cool for my little weird art collection. So I decided to bring them back to my apartment I shared with my girlfriend and her daughter. Everything seemed in usual repetition, but strange things have been happening. Well, it first started when my daughter started having nightmares. I took it as just a bad dream. You know, everyone has them from time to time. That was 5 weeks ago. She wakes up every morning around 3 a.m. screaming. No, repetitively. It has been hard to get her to bed lately, as she will try and stay up as late as she can. It seems she is afraid to fall asleep. When she wakes up screaming, my girlfriend or I go and check on her till she falls asleep again. When she wakes, it looks as if she is tired and paranoid, as she is constantly scanning the room. She seems to also avoid looking at the dolls when she walks by them. Other than that, 4 lights, parlor, kitchen, bathroom, my room in the house blew out in 5 minutes. Not only that, but soon the central air in the morning would be turned on from the high 80s to the low 50s, causing my girlfriend and I to fight about each other needing to stop the AC. I know for a fact I don't touch the AC, and she claims she definitely has not touched it. So I called my friend who is a licensed handyman. So he took a look at everything and said everything seems to be in order and that the bulbs are just old. So I just bought some new ones and everything seemed better, while the lights are working at least. So days go on and the same events are occurring with her daughter. Well, one night I was staying up playing Mario Run when I heard her daughter talking, so I went to go check on her. When I go in her room, I walk over to her bed and she is passed out dead asleep. I just chalked it up to sleep talking. I go back to the couch to lay down and relax. I'm later woken up by her daughter screaming no and flailing. Because of this I can't sleep and am feeling paranoid and very weak. I told my girlfriend about what I think about what's going on in the house. She just said I'm crazy and paranoid, that I should stop trying to piece things together that have nothing in common. So a few days go by, my girlfriend starts believing me cause now she's hearing knocking on either the front or back door. She said I was cuddling her. I was on the couch that night and heard people in the house when no one was there. So I took the dolls and put them on the front porch of my apartment. Still the same stuff happened. The only thing that's new is the elderly Spanish neighbor who would sit on his porch and play his guitar. Well, I would go out to smoke a cigarette and greet him while he'd jam on his guitar. Well, after that he was out there less and less. I haven't seen him play in days. When I say hello, he doesn't respond to me, as if he hit me with the silent treatment. One morning I went outside and there was a ring with salt and a Virgin Mary candle still lit on my front porch. I'm bugging out. What should I do?
My ex-girlfriend used to buy a lot of shit from Goodwill. A lot of the items are simply haunted. Most aren't, though. Trinkets, things you hang on the walls, too, which she loved, shit from the 1970s, like ugly yellow paintings of flowers on ugly pieces of wood. Retards back then would just hang on the wall. Why? I don't know, so ugly would fly off the wall. One time, a ring she had bought somehow embedded itself into a candle after a couple of paranormal instances of books flying off the shelf. Mind you, this was 6 or 7 years ago, but she still maintains her word in telling these stories. The most recent thing in my house, which I've never, ever had paranormal activity in our houses. My mother practically grew up in one house that I grew up in, and my father built the second house I finished growing up in, but this old house I am renting a room in now. On Easter Sunday, when all of my roommates had left, I went to the back door and the door knob was disassembled. The screws holding the halves together were actually screwed and past the contact points of the other half, so I had to unscrew the screws and re-screw it in. It was a bizarre Easter Sunday afternoon. The house ghost must have been feeding off the energy of the holiday, that's for sure. I've heard footsteps in the house before, too, but this was the cherry on top of the haunted cake, a disassembled door knob on Easter Sunday.
Several years ago, my dad broke into an abandoned house in our neighborhood on a somewhat drunken impulse. While there, he claimed to have heard a disembodied voice speaking in Japanese, only to find out later that the last occupant of the house was indeed Japanese. We lived in a town with a pretty much non-existent Asian community, and the house had laid empty for years since the occupant's death in the house. If he did not hear a ghost in that house, then I don't know what it could have been. He fled the house that night with a single trophy of his escapade, an old metal pitcher similar to pick related. For years after this, the pitcher rested on a shelf in our house with no incident. The incident started after my parents divorced. My siblings and I were all adults at this point, out of the house and on our own. The divorce was messy and full of emotional distress, and my mother was left alone in the house. That was when the incidents began. For weeks my mother would hear strange noises and banging sounds emanating from the room where the picture was kept. They only stopped when my brother took the picture and kept it in his apartment, which he shared with a girlfriend. Nothing happened until my brother and his girlfriend hit what he described as a rough patch. They experienced the same strange sounds and banging noises in this time of anger and sadness, suggesting a correlation. Emotional distress triggers the haunting. I myself took the picture next. I shared a house with several other people, and though there was plenty of emotional distress, I can't say I experienced anything. Of course, there were enough odd noises and banging sounds from more natural sources that I'm not sure I would have noticed if there was anything to experience. One of my roommates was really into dubstep. I moved out of the house to live with my current girlfriend, leaving the picture behind and more or less forgetting about it until a few days ago. There has been a new development. I recently hired one of my former roommates, who was ignorant of the picture's haunted history, did in fact barely know it existed. We were talking of spooky things, and he told me of something he could not explain. Owing to working 2 jobs, my former roommate, who we'll call Charlie, keeps odd hours and sleeps whenever he catches a chance. Recently, Charlie was awakened by sounds from the living room. It seemed to sound like another roommate. We'll call her Ashley talking to someone. He distinctly heard 2 voices. Casey told me he was confused because it was very late and he was unaware of any visitors. He stepped out into the hall just in time to see Ashley step into her bedroom, followed by a tall figure dressed in black. Charlie thought it was a friend of theirs named David and asked Ashley about it the next day. Confused, she told him David did not visit last night, no one did, and that she went to her bedroom alone. Charlie told her he could hear them talking, and Ashley said that she could hear Charlie talking to someone at roughly the same time. She too heard 2 distinct voices, only they seemed to be coming from his bedroom. So far as I know, this is the first time anyone has seen any sort of apparition relating to the picture, but Ashley's bedroom is right next to the laundry room, which is where I left the picture. I told him to bring the picture up to work on his next scheduled day. If he does, I'll follow up with another thread, maybe get a Ouija board and hold a seance or something. I'm open to suggestions. No one has yet tried to actually evoke any sort of haunting from this thing, but I intend to try.
I have an old Albanian rifle that has the spirit of something or someone attached to it. Nothing paranormal used to happen around my house until I got it. It started off as my wife telling me she would hear footsteps in my man cave, where I keep it locked up in the safe, while I was away at home. I played it off as she probably just heard the floor creaking considering the house isn't new construction. One day I was home alone watching TV in the living room. Then I started hearing heavy footsteps coming from my man cave. These weren't just light footsteps, they were like someone wearing boots. So I ran up the stairs and found nothing. All was as usual. Second paranormal experience occurred a few weeks later. I was in the bathroom taking a dump when I heard knocking and scratching on the door. I thought it was just my wife trying to tell me to hurry up. I just responded with a "hold on, I'm going." I got no response and the knocking continued for a bit more. Then it stopped and it sounded like my wife just walked away to the bedroom that was just a couple feet away from the bathroom. I finished up and went to the bedroom to tell my wife what she wanted, but the room was empty. I noped out and rushed to look for my wife, who was in the basement doing laundry the whole time. There was no way it could have been her. After these 2 occurrences, I connected the dots and drew the conclusion that all this stuff happening had to be caused by something attached to the rifle. So I took it out of the safe and said to whatever it was attached to that their time has passed and they are free to go, or if for some reason they chose to keep being attached, they had to stop messing around. Since then, nothing has really happened except the occasional footsteps.
This happened 5 years ago. I remember that time when I arrived home from school to find this huge dresser inside my room. My mom got it from some garage sale for a cheap price. I told her that I don't want it because it was too big for my room and it looked rather strange, but she still insisted. I woke up somewhere around 1:30 to a soft knocking sound coming from inside the dresser itself. I was feeling a bit scared and it came to me that maybe it was just a rat that was causing the sound. I felt a slight relief and decided to go back to sleep. I'll just have to deal with it tomorrow when I hear a faint wailing. I was really scared, so I covered myself with a blanket. It continued for like a minute or so, then it stopped along with the knocking. 10 minutes had passed. I was listening carefully, but there was no wailing or knocking anymore. I was about to go back to sleep when the knocking sound returned. This time it was really furious, like there was something inside that wanted to get out. I was freaking out at this point. I tossed my blanket and made a run for it without looking at the dresser, fearing what I might see. I went to my parents' room and tried to tell them what happened, but I was hysterical, so they did not understand anything I was saying. After calming down, I told them everything that happened. The next day, my mom contacted the lady in charge of the garage sale. She agreed when my mom told her that we were going to return the dresser after telling her what happened. My mom asked if it was cursed or something, but the lady told her that she knows nothing about the dresser except that it belonged to her late grandfather. Later I found out that the brother of that lady's late grandfather got mad at her for selling his brother's stuff without his consent when she and my mom called him to know about the dresser's history. According to him, the dresser originally belonged to their great-grandfather, who had an 18-year-old daughter who got killed when their home was burglarized when her parents were away. It was said that her body was hidden inside the dresser and discovered a day later. And the ones who killed her never got caught. So my advice is be careful in buying second-hand stuff because they might hide a dark past.
Hick semi-related. So without being long-winded, here we go. A while back my mother got 3 really cool-looking African teak wood-carved busts from a lady she worked with because she said they creeped her out. A few months later I moved in with an Australian chick living in the States, and I bring the busts over to show the roomie, and we ended up keeping them at the apartment. Then some weird shit started, like for instance not often but at least once that stood out. I was sitting outside with the door open, and I live in a fairly windy area, but as I was sitting outside and the wind was really still, I felt a quick short burst of air behind my ear. And almost seemed like I could hear the sound of lips pursed together to focus the blow. So distinct, I jumped up from my chair, fist drawn, to confront whoever did it, and you guessed it, no one was there. That happened a few times, but nothing ever really threatening. I also would hear the sounds of knees popping like when you're walking, and again no one around to make the noise. So one day I confront the busts. There was 3, 2 female and 1 male. I threatened to make them the centerpiece of our next bonfire if they didn't chill out, and basically to keep an eye out for my roommate because she was a little ditzy and forgetful at times. Roommate later tells me she likes the busts because it's like they remind her when she's cooking so as to not burn anything, and kinda scoffed when I asked her if she could believe they had that effect because someone asked them to look after her. So basically I just want to know, is there a possibility that what I experienced was real and they actually responded to interaction, or I'm just the proud owner of one overactive imagination? Thanks in advance.
X, I think I unknowingly bought a cursed object or some form of a hex. My girlfriend got me a keychain from a for-trade kind of store in Kernville, Northern California. It's some acrylic or epoxy piece of shit, but it has crystals in it and a shitty gold-etched symbol on it. Pick-related. I think it's cursed because I have a new Subaru Forester. It's a 2018 with less than 25,000 miles on it. These cars go 250,000 to 300,000 miles easily. Well, starting the same day I put this keychain on my keys, our heating and coolant lines are cording and bursting. Every 2 we ordered came 2 or 4 hours later than the ETA said. We got overcharged for towing that was supposed to be free. We've taken it to the mechanic 4 times now, and every time they test drive it for 45 minutes. No issues at all. The second I get in with my keychain, something else bursts, and we take it back. I just hurried the object in a nearby wooded area so nobody will ever find it again. But is it possible this object is cursed? Or am I just really unlucky?
On my 16th birthday, I received an interesting gift from my best friend, a talisman that was sold to his father by a Native American shaman. As the story was told to me, the shaman sold him 2 talismans, one that would bring love and one that would bring luck to his life. He claims the talisman of love broke shortly after he divorced his wife, which then he gave the talisman of luck to his son. My friend, who was then gifted, said talisman to me. It appears to be a copper wire warped around a smooth small oval of amber. The talisman is roughly 3 inches long and an inch thick. It's designed to hang from something, so naturally I put it up on my wall. Well, one day when playing Monopoly with my family, I decided to play around and call out for my good luck charm to achieve a specific roll. I believe I had asked for double 6s, and to my amazement I rolled just that. Thinking of course it was just a random chance, I then asked for another pair of numbers and rolled them as well. I did this, if I can remember correctly, nearly 8 times before my bizarre string of luck ended. My parents, disturbed by this event, asked me to get rid of the talisman. As far as they know I have, but naturally I kept it hidden from view, have since moved out and put the talisman back up on my wall. I'm still not sure how it quite works, but I do seem to get lucky when it counts to be so.
I own what appears to be a Roman coin bearing the face of Emperor Caligula. Has some Gothic sigil carved over the face. Really finely dug in, like someone had to take the time to carve it in deep. I got it from my grandfather. During the Great War, he survived 2 mustard gas attacks and was never once hit by any gunfire. He claims the coin was responsible and was found in a little cloth bag below the earth in Verdun. Allegedly, it also contained the bones of a few small animals and was big enough to fit in the palm of one's hand. The one time he did lose his lucky trinket, his trench was shelled and he lost half of his left foot. Miraculously, the coin was later returned to my great-grandpappy by one of his comrades in arms, incidentally, one who escaped from the same shelling that cost great-grandfather his left foot, despite being only a few meters from him. For a while, he said, it looked like his wounds were becoming gangrenous. Upon the return of this odd little relic, his wounds actually began healing at an accelerated rate. Of course, he was still down a foot and was thus discharged. Oddly, his friend copied it to phosgene gas a few weeks later. I've been saved a few times by the coin, too. Hit by a car 3 times and not once have I experienced any broken bones or ruptures. Just a little bit of pain. The one time I broke my leg, I was playing football and elected to leave the coin at home, not wanting to lose it.
My great-uncle was a self-employed hat maker. He made all sorts of hats. Hats were significant to him in terms of personal flair and maybe even social status. When I grew up, it was much more common for businessmen or men in general to wear hats. His business catered mostly to Bayern and had even clients coming in from Prague. One day we were coming back from the cemetery as we did every month, and he told me that he had a dream about his wife who had died the prior year, mentioning that they had a lengthy conversation in his dream. I was quite young and I do remember feeling the nature of the topic was inappropriate. Anyway, we were sitting on a bench outside and he continued to tell me about the importance of his hat. The one he had maintained for about 29 years, what he wanted to do with his business should anything happen to him, and so after a while he fell silent. On an otherwise still day, a burst of wind blew his hat clean off his head. A passerby quickly collected it before it blew away. As you've probably guessed, when he offered the hat to my great-uncle, he was unresponsive. Sitting on the bench with glassy eyes, he was certainly dead. The hat was given to his sister, my grandmother, and she died soon after due to undiagnosed, undetected rampant cancer. When she died and my grandfather came into possession of the hat, he died. A year between each death, though my grandfather, who was strong like the ox, seemed to just give up his will to live, maybe unrelated to the hat. The trend was picked up by my superstitious family and it was decided the hat should be destroyed. One of my uncles then took the hat and said he would burn it, though he too died a year later. Unbeknownst to our family, he chose to keep the hat in his own possession. It's become a topic of morbid humor to those who can remember. This very strange series of events that was cutting off the branches of our tree was seemingly following that hat.
I found a gas mask that fit the description. Was only in possession of it for about 2 minutes before it returned to the stream literally. An area had just been bulldozed where a battle had taken place, and die alti-aish. I found it in the stream and carried it to a place to wash it. When I stood up, a metal bar hit me hard in the head and the gas mask returned to the water from my hand. As it sank, it moved as if it was being worn. It turned to look at me and then back into the smoke/muddy water. It looked back at me and moved as if worn by a person walking. Was surreal. But I saw what I saw. I had been warned of such occurrences with war artifacts, but had though nothing of pulling teeth from the filter of a burned gas mask I had found. I had not seen any metal bar above me as I stepped out onto the small concrete platform to wash it, but after being struck by it as I stood, I had to use it to keep from falling. It was a strange lesson in the gap that bridges one realm from another in this reality.
Had an Egyptian scarab bead once. Pic-related, look almost exactly like it did. I got it from my uncle when I was around 4. He was staying in Egypt at the time. I had it strung onto a necklace with my name strung around it. And I had a bunch of really vivid nightmares which I refer to as jumping skull, pool things, and others upstairs for convenience sake. After about a year, the necklace, made of really cheap string, broke and I lost all but one of the letters used to make my name. I literally haven't had a single memorable nightmare since, this being around 15 years ago. Possibly related, I have had difficulty getting to sleep, no matter what I tried, until midnight or later every night until a few months ago when I lost the scarab itself.
Got 2 stories. First is about a leather bracelet. I was about 15 or 16 when I got it from some random street vendor. It was black leather and had some metal pieces on it, like runic symbols or something. I just thought it looked cool. After a while of wearing it on my left wrist, I started noticing strange bruises and small scratches on that arm. One day I tried wearing it on my right wrist and the same thing happened on my right arm. Decided it was cursed, burnt the leather and buried the metal pieces. Never had those bruises again. Second one is about a small stone. At the time I was dating this girl and she took a trip to Brazil. Upon coming back, among other things she bought me a small green stone with a little keychain attached. It looked a bit like quartz, but different. Pale green, with small darker areas and some white veins. I carried it around and played with it in my hand. It was shaped like a long rectangle. One day I was in class mindlessly doodling and I kinda spaced out doing so. When I looked, I had drawn that very same stone, but broken in half, with something that looked like bleeding where it broke. Later that day, I was playing with it as usual and it suddenly broke, just as I had drawn. A couple of days later my GF broke up with me. I kept the remains of the stone for a while, but I felt drained whenever I carried them around, so I eventually threw them away.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentexts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.